Hello, I'm Matt Peterson.
And I'm Rich Trappier.
And this is episode 59 of History on the Table. Welcome back, Richard, listeners.
Back. It's been exactly a month since you recorded.
Has it?
Yeah. I was looking at the date on the last one. It was March 30th, and now it's April 30th. So we're hitting that last day of the month perfectly.
I'd say we planned it, but we actually had to reschedule a recording because we were both exhausted from traveling, and
I know
traveling with little kids is a mess.
I've done so much traveling this month. I've been out of town 3 weekends this month, and had stuff going on the other weekend. I don't have a free Saturday until the last Saturday of May. So it's just been a crazy, crazy month, but it's going, and I'm here.
Busy little hotties around here.
Yeah.
Speaking of busy little hotties, it's time to get busy for HistoriKC, August 15th through the 18th, 2024. Now is really real the time to start signing up and getting those. My schedule's locked. I'm set in. I've got it completely filled out. Next WarCon tournament, you make sure you go sign up for that if you're interested. We got all kinds of other stuff. We got all kinds of goodies showing up at my house. So we're going to make great door prizes. All of the details are down at the bottom of our show notes.
Yeah, I heard Mitch say he's hoping to have a copy of Next Door I Ran there.
Yes.
That'd be cool.
Yes. Now, Rich, we do have some other news. So HistoriKC is the most important news. Did you? I know I'm not going to get into the drams of it all, because some people get use out of this, some people don't. But did you happen to take a quick little gander at the 2023 Charles S. Robert Award nominees?
I took a quick look. Obviously, I wanted to make sure that Plantagenet was represented on there, because that was my favorite game of last year, I think. So, other than the other ones, I didn't do a lot of game buying last year, which meant I didn't get a lot of 2023 games, but I got a couple.
Good. I do want to say that there's a few standouts for me. First being the James F. Dunnigan Award for Playability and Design. It's got to go to Mike Denson. Now, you vote however you want, but it's for the designer who, through excellence of design, most impact on playability and elegance field of conflict simulations, not only his last 100 yards, completely revamped the field of tactical, World War II tactical wargaming. But just as a steward of game design and someone with so much passion for their game and bringing people in the fold and willing to teach it, Mike deserves it. So
yeah,
there's my
that's the big
plug.
thing. I mean, if you don't know how to play, it's pretty easy to find a place where he will teach you.
Yeah,
that's his job now, is just to travel around the country spreading the gospel of the last 100 yards. So,
well, I wanna ask you a little question.
Okay.
You said that Plantagenet was probably your favorite game of last year. I don't disagree with you, but I think the game of the year presents some really tough choices. So now you have to pick.
Sure.
I'll put you on the spot.
You're gonna have to remind me what else was on there, because I don't have it in front of me.
That's okay.
Okay.
It's like I was almost prepared for it. Okay. So first off, congratulations to Plantagenet. It was nominated. I will, I'll do this. I'll build up some tension here. So we are coming, Nineveh. Hadn't heard of it, from Nuts Publishing. The British Way from GMT Games.
I've played it.
Mr. President from GMT Games.
Have not played it.
Europa Universalis, The Price of Power from Azure Games.
Haven't played it. I know a little about it.
Then we get Plantagenet, Cousins War for England, GMT Games, designed by Francisco Radiale Paco. Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich, Chad Zinson, John
also
Butterfield.
A 2023 game.
And a little spoiler for June, which is going to be BCS Month, Valley of Tears, designed by Carl Fung over there at
That's
NMP.
right. That was a 2023 game. I forgot about that one as
well. So, do you still stand by Plantagenet, or... Because I'll tell you how I voted.
Oh, my connection is going out. Yeah. Wow.
The thunderstorms in Kansas City are affecting Rich in St. Louis.
Solitaire, I'd go BCS. Multiplayer, I'd probably go Plantagenet.
So which one are you picking?
Oh, boy. Well, as I've been half lamenting and half just, coming to grips with, I'm mostly a solitaire player now, so I guess I'd give the edge to Valley of Tears.
Very good. I voted Plantagenet.
Yeah.
As one might expect.
Part of the reason that I like Plantagenet so much is because my daughter likes it so much. So I have an opponent here in the house that is happy to play it. The problem is, like, her working hours and my working hours are pretty much exact opposite right now, so I haven't been able to play anything.
One other quick note on the Charles and Straub Award, then we'll get to the real competition, the real deal. ACW. A very light year for American Civil War games last year. Gettysburg, Grand Havoc, and 7 Days Battles were the 3 nominations. What's interesting is, and this isn't necessarily a critique, just more of a comment, is On to Richmond 2 did not get an ACW because it was considered a new edition. Now, I think that's fair, that's valid, but there was a whole new entire ass game inside of On to Richmond 2.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And for me, it's just difference of opinion here. I would have On to Richmond 2 in with the ACW games because, well, that's just how I feel. So,
yeah.
I like the idea of the changes they made, which is why you don't see the Historical Board Game Awards, because it's very much a committee presenting final nominees for public vote. I like that model. I think there's a lot of games missing, but you're never going to get it right? I mean, there were
never going to get 100%
and there always will be
for sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. But we'll see how it goes. I like to follow them. I get service out of it because it turns me on to new games, or at least looking into things that I may not otherwise be turned on to or otherwise explore, whether they're hot garbage or not. They do serve a little bit of purpose for me. Whether they do for you or not, well, that's between you and your maker. Okay, now the real competition of 2024.
The varsity. The main event.
And congratulations off the bat to Mac as our winner of the 2024 Every Series Ever competition.
It was quick. What voting?
I wanted to keep it
a week
busy.
Or so?
Yeah, basically, I wanted to get done before. I didn't want to drag it out. I wanted to, 4 votes a day. Mm-hmm. So we pitted for 5 months or so. I collected responses on what everyone's favorite series was, and I left that interpretation open for them to decide. So what you may think is a series, someone else may not think is a series, but we took the most popular results and then some noticeable absentees that certainly qualify. Something like it was a late edition. What am I thinking of? Fighting Formations, right? Clearly a series. Got added on. It didn't necessarily get the votes, but we capped the field at 64, or we're getting some really fringe cases, and the first round of competitions were going to be kind of meaningless. So our Elite 8 was GCACW, to very little surprise. Levy and Campaign. Love both of those. Next War. Great Battles of the American Revolution, GBACW. Operational Combat Series, Zoc Bond. Battalion Combat Series, and Richard, can you believe it? Men of Iron.
I can believe that it made it. It's especially on our Discord. I mean, we got a pretty big cheerleader that's always pumping it up.
Do you, in your opinion, honestly, is Men of Iron a top 8 series of all your favorite series of all time? Now, obviously, this was a fan vote. It's not a Rich vote. It's not a Matt vote. I'm just curious. Do you think Men of Iron for you is like a top 8?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it beat to get in there and how I voted, or I don't remember. But I don't think I would have had it in the. No, I don't think I would have had it in top 8.
And I'm not. no shame in having it in the top 8. It's a great, very fun series. There's just a lot of things I would put it in because they're also fun and they do more. They offer better play experiences. I think deeper play experiences are worth exploring more. But obviously, I still like Men of Iron. Not saying it doesn't deserve to be in the top 8, but it beat some great things. It lost to Bar, Battles from the Age of Reason, which I haven't played, but friend of the show, Mitchell Land, is a huge fan of Bar.
Yeah.
That's a loved series. It lost the Last 100 Yards, which is just like bizarre to me. And then it lost to Blind Sword, or it beat Blind Swords. Beat all line. Beat Bar, beat Last 100 Yards, and beat Blind Swords. Which is all three of those I'd probably put in front of Men of Iron, although I haven't played Bar.
Yeah. I was surprised to see it beat Blind Swords, because Blind Swords is another one that on the Discord has some very vocal proponents.
So we wove through that Elite 8 down to a final matchup between GCACW and Battalion Combat Series. And Battalion Combat Series gave GCACW... I mean, I predicted that GCACW was going to run away with it. And BCS won, and it was close. It was a 3-vote difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then we did a third-place vote, and OCS was on top of Next War for your top 4 series of all time, at least according to all the little hotties out there.
Yeah, I guess.
You good with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that. I'm fine with that. I mean, those as the top 4 series. Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't put in a guess at the beginning, but I think I probably would have guessed GCACW to win the whole thing. I don't think I would have guessed BCS to finish second, but I leave BCS, so I'm happy to see that.
I thought for sure, which just proves exactly how much your hosts know, that OCS would beat BCS. At least in when I went back into it, on my first draft, I had BCS versus GCCW, and I'm like, I'm just trying to vote to like win, to like actually predict it. I'm going to follow like my heart. And right now, OCS is, we've talked about this in depth, where maybe BCS has edged out OCS for you. I still have a very soft spot for OCS. All of this to say that June for History on the Table will be officially BCS month.
Nice.
Doesn't matter. We're gonna get the vote in early, so we have plenty of time to play it and spend time with it. But we are going to pick one of the games from the series and do a whole feature on one of the BCS titles.
Cool.
Very much looking forward to it.
Sounds like a good plan to me.
It does. What a month. I haven't even talked about what we played.
No. You know what I played?
What'd you play, Rich?
Nothing. Like, I literally did not play a game all month. It was crazy. Except for, just kind of playing around with the couple that we're going to do our feature on this month. I have not played anything this month. It's been that bad.
We're not in sync. That's our problem. Because
That's true.
You were hot last month, and then this month,
Yeah, but
I had an amazing month.
Donkey Kong starts tomorrow, so I got some gaming ahead of me this week.
Well, tomorrow is May. That's all I have to say to you.
That's right, and I have nothing to say about April, so so tell me how great your month was.
Well, why don't we start with what we know and love and talk about Last 100 Yards?
All right.
I played it.
You play Russia
played
again?
With
I know you really liked it.
Played Mission 4 from Europe with friend of the show,
Europe,
Hector.
Meaning the original
Okay. OG,
gotcha.
Module 1. And no matter how many times Mike Denson, I've listened to him talk, I've played against him, and he's taught me amazing strategy and tactics. It's all... I'm still shitty. I still had a blast, though. It's just like, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do that. No, let me just land this guy right in your line of sight. Amazing. It's so good. Just the concept of command on the battlefield. Having an absolute blast with it. And then Hector actually reached out this week just to, like, he's all horned up for it as well right now. So trying to get as much of that in while it's fresh. And then Kansas City Historical Gaming Group, it was a light month for attendance. I was out of town, but they all got together and played some Last 100 Yards scenario as well. So lots of Last 100 Yards going on in the KC area over the last month. It's good. It's very, very good. I think it's my favorite tactical series.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'll say that.
I need to play it more. I need to play everything more, but yeah.
You know what I need to play more of?
What's that?
Mark Herman's Mark Herman's For the People.
Are you playing that on Rally the Troops? Is that on there?
No, is it on there?
I don't know.
No, I don't think it's on there. That'd be insane.
He's got something on there. Maybe I'm thinking of.
He's got the Waterloo game.
Waterloo, is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Never
For
mind.
the People is there's two games. When I would tell people that Civil War is my favorite game, I would always get, have you played Victory Games? Civil War, and have you played For the People? And so it's very early. Like, we've done a year. And I like it. I like the card play. I think the card play is actually very interesting. I like the events. I like the, not just the events on the card, but what the events allow you to do.
Uh-huh.
You can create the Iron Brigade and all this stuff, and you can create and form armies, but it's much more strict and rigid rules than it is in something like U.S. Civil War. Way lighter than Empire of the Sun, which means it's significantly lighter than Pacific War, which isn't even a CDG anyways. But yeah, it's really, really good. Do I think U.S. Civil War is even remotely at risk of being dethroned? No, not at all. Do I like this game? Yes. Am I excited for my P500 copy to show up any day? Absolutely.
Is there any similarity between For the People and We the People?
My gut is to say no, but there are things, just for example, you can use your ops points to put down control markers to take regions.
Okay.
But not near the extent it is in my play of We the People, where that's so much of the game.
Gotcha.
That feels like a very strong part here, especially in the opening moves, especially on what your first, I think you start with 4 cards in the first turn. You can be limited if you get a bad card draw and what you can do and what you go off and do. And so some of that first turn is just deploying control of Kentucky and Missouri and things like that. And you can do that for supply, and it kind of daisy chains based off where you have units at the end of the turn. So there is that kind of political control element going on. That is what it shares with We the People that I've seen so far.
Cool.
I'm very excited to continue to explore it. And the new box cover is amazing. Other than that, just the typical Rally the People stuff, so we don't need to talk about that.
Yeah.
I think it is time to talk about what we read.
Yeah, that I did get to do. Because the nice thing is when you're traveling a lot, you get to read more. So
very good.
I read a book that you recommended a while ago called Red Platoon, which was amazing.
Good.
You recommended that one to me. So it's a book about an attack on an American outpost in Afghanistan, and honestly, it reminds me so much of Dien Bien Phu. This was
right?
way out in the middle of nowhere. Obviously there's a big difference in what your support options are when you're talking about 50 or 60 years difference, but it reminded me a lot of that, and it's just a really good book. I have not had a chance to read, what's the other one called, The Last Outpost, that also tells the same story. Haven't had a chance to read that one, but Red Platoon, highly recommended. Made me want to play some ATS Modern or something like that, because it'd be a cool battle to fight out.
Yeah. What I will say is, if you liked Red Platoon, one, I will say that someone needs to design a Cobb Keating game. Not Last Outpost. What is that called? What is the last one called? Oh my gosh, I can't believe.
You're talking about
it's just the Outpost.
The Outpost. Okay, sorry.
If you liked Cobb Keating, I still recommend you go read The Outpost, because it's such a bigger picture, whereas Red Platoon is this snapshot from Clint Romashay's perspective, and it gives a little bit of the background.
And
the Outpost,
it's Jake Tapper, isn't it?
It is Jake Tapper. Yeah, okay. You got it. Just as readable, just as enjoyable. but it also talks about just like the failed attempts of winning the hearts and minds and all the fuck ups at Cop Keating going into it and just bigger picture stuff. Both of them are 5 out of 5. But yeah, Red Platoon is just so engrossing and just tragic at times.
Yeah. And just, I think good. Of all the things that impressed me the most about that story, though, was the stuff that all the pilots were doing was just absolutely amazing. You know, just circling above and maintaining contact with everything and calling in raids and just unbelievable.
So that's my, if someone was going to do a Red Platoon book, I mean, a game, I think a core component of that, like if you were going to do a modern warfare game, engage about one particular engagement, I think a strong component of it has to be somehow managing the stack, all the air power, and I don't know what that looks like because I'm not a game designer. I think it would be quote unquote easy. It'd be a lot of work, I get that, to design a modern tactical game, but then how do you reflect air power without just like going in and sweeping it? Right. And I was like, well, what if you could gamify exactly what you just pointed out, managing all the air power and helicopters and all that stuff? I think it'd be really cool if someone could pull it off. Good. I read a book, or I am reading a book. I hope to have this done, but I've been reading a shit ton. And then I read Anthony Beever's Russian Civil War book for one of our featured games, and thing was thick. But I have made significant progress in George Henry Thomas as True of Steel, and I promised I'd follow up on this. So far, it's like hovering out of 4 out of 5, 5 out of 5. It is a dense, thick book. I really like it. It's very approachable. It's also very favorable of George Henry Thomas, which I'm all for. It weirdly will be like, it shifts gears all in the same setting, like very abruptly. Like it'll be talking about like a master at West Point or something like that, and then like how it pivots to another point can be really sharp. Otherwise, it's very good. It's very readable. It's very long though, so still enjoying that one. I said I would follow up this month. I just haven't finished it yet, but I recommend it. I'm right in the thick of like the Civil War stuff, and it's a long one and spent a long time on it. So very good book. I recommend it.
Cool. Yeah, the other one I've listened to is Troy by Stephen Fry. So he's just amazing. I'm listening to audiobook. He wrote it and he narrates it. He reads it. So
that was gonna be my question. Yeah, he did both. Okay, nice.
It's actually the third in a series he did. First one was called Mythos, and then Heroes, and now Troy. And all of them obviously based on the old Greek mythology and the stories of, you know, all the writers from that day, the plays and everything they did. But it's good. It's obviously about the Trojan War and, you know, the meddlings of the gods and people's businesses and the heroes and the fights, and, you know, a great chapter on Achilles versus Hector. And just if you're at all interested in Greek mythology, I'd recommend the whole series. On audiobooks, you can listen to Stephen Fry read it to you.
Awesome. Rich,
yes.
You took a whole month off.
I know.
You didn't get to play anything. Something has got to have you hot-blooded.
I'm hot-blooded because I don't get to play games anymore. No, that was a busy month. So actually, the thing that I'm the most interested in right now is this new, what's it called? The Civil War. It's the one, the Rebel Fury, and there's a new one coming out too. Civil War Heritage Series. And there's a new one about P500 called the Army of the Potomac. So the first 2 games in the series, getting some buzz. They look really interesting to me. You know, it's weird. I've talked about it before, but Miniature Market shut down one of their locations, and their other one it's further away from me. It's not anywhere that I'm ever just going to like drive by. So I don't ever just go in there anymore. But I've been wanting to go pick up Rebel Fury. And I know it's at Miniature Market, and I think I'm going to get a copy of that this week because that series is really intriguing me, and I'm excited to, I guess you could say, I'm hot-blooded about it.
Love to hear it, because that's what I was last month, and we'll be writing that spoiler alert into the next month.
Yeah.
Solid. And I love it.
I think the stuff you've said and Patrick and other people, just there's a lot of buzz about it, and it looks cool and it looks interesting. And then when I saw the GMT update come out with the second game in the series already, I was like, I definitely got to get into this.
Love it.
How about you?
Rich, I'm doing a little blast from the past, the recent past, but I'm going all the way back to episode. Without looking, don't scroll down. Episode 13. Do you know what rulebook I'm reading, Rich?
13. That's about when I joined, isn't it? Yeah. What rulebook are you reading?
I thought you were asking.
Oh,
Give me a guess. We don't have a Wargame game today, so give me a little guess.
Advanced Squad Leader.
No, we haven't ranked Advanced Squad Leader.
I know we haven't. That's why.
Oh, okay. We ranked this game in episode 13.
Oh, we ranked it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. I can't guess.
Okay, fine. I am reading and prepping to play this Friday in an Irish pub with Guinness.
Yeah.
And Scotch eggs with the other KC Matt. Silver Bayonet.
Nice.
We're going to play one of the little one-mapper cardstock scenarios in the bar.
Yeah.
And just reading the rules, it's like, man, this is such a great little game. It's not overly complex. It's super... I like it. I'm so excited to be playing Silver Bayonet. It's one of those games when we look at the list, it's like, oh, Silver Bayonet, and then we never do anything with it. I'm very excited to be brushing up on the rules and playing some Silver Bayonet.
Nice.
That's what I'm horned up for.
When I think of the small scenarios from Silver Bayonet, I think of like some pretty inept North Vietnamese and Viet Cong, and I think of the the Americans have the ability to react into spaces to reinforce, and then that leads me to a game we're going to talk about later today, the reacting part of it.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, how about
look
that?
At that. Well, maybe we should just use that as a segue and maybe change up the order.
All right,
and
sure.
Talk about a little bit about this pick came from our good friend Nate. This was his choice. And that is NATO, the Cold War, man. Mark Horman, the Cold War. I actually said that normal that time. Goes hot. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so it's a Bruce Maxwell game, art by Bruce Urian, who I've never heard of, so I'll have to stick that into my mental database of Wargame game artists that I never know. It is a Compass Games game, which is the theme for the month, I think, and it came out actually. So I guess new Compass games is, I still consider 2021 a new game. So it came out in 2021 by Compass Games. Although this one this is like a designer special edition, right? So I assume there's
original was 83.
One. Yeah. Okay. So
Victory Games.
Yeah, and it's you can. I did not get to look a lot at this game. Just I read through the rule book, pushed a couple vassal counters around, just kind of saw the basic mechanics. So I'm really interested to hear what you thought of this, because I know you put a lot more time into this one than I did.
Yeah, I am. I'm very happy to talk about this one because spoiler alert, I enjoyed it immensely. So painting the picture, it's Cold War. Cold War goes hot. It's brigade division level. So Western Europe in the 1980s. And I want to talk about a number of things here. So we've played obviously other Cold War games, and this is like the theater, right? Western Europe, Warsaw Pact invades through Germany, where wherever they're going to go, yada yada yada. We often give Compass a bad rap around here, and I want to kind of focus on the quality of this game, but also some of the quirks, and then some of the really rewarding nuances of this game. So like I said, this is operational scale brigades, divisions with different command structure. So just for example, Warsaw Pact will have different army groups. Oh boy, I don't remember what they're actually called, but they'll belong to a certain group. And then you'll have different command structures for NATO as well. A lot of that will be broken down by country. And it is, unfortunately, I go, you go for the most part, but I found it very enjoyable still. Like, there wasn't a lot of downtime when I played the Supposed in terms of not being able to do anything. I'm trying to think big picture stuff before I dive into like all of the nuance. Let me like, maybe we can do this as you ask some things you might be curious about, not to put you on the spot, but like big picture wise, do you have any like questions? If I was like coming to you this cold and I was like, Rich, let me tell you about this game called Warsaw Pact, or any big picture stuff that you have questions about or anything like that.
What's the scenario design like? I know there's one little intro one that I played with a little bit. I assume there's a whole shebang. What is there in the middle?
Yeah, so you nailed it exactly. So there's the ball tap scenario, which cracks me up. That's called ball tap.
Yeah.
And then there are two kind of in between scenarios, but then they're broken down further. So you have strategic surprise. That's if Warsaw Pact catches NATO with their pants down, as you might expect. And then there's also extended build-up. So what if both sides get to do build-up and then go to war? And they each have their own victory conditions. And then there's a War of Nerves option, which I did not get to play War of Nerves Opposed, which is a real shame because it very much seems to be, if you played it Opposed, what is Warsaw Pact going to do? When are they going to kick things off? But also NATO's getting a chance to respond and do a little bit of their own build up. So instead of saying, hey, Warsaw Pact, you get the option to invade while NATO is sleeping, you're now in the driver's seat playing this like early game, pre-game mini game where you're taking an action and then you're committing different resources here and you're moving these tracks up. And once you get to a certain point on the track, like that's your loadout for the initial invasion as the Warsaw Pact. And so it's a little bit about a bluffing game. You're kind of committing resources, and that's the whole shebang. It's got its own set of rules. I just kind of messed around with the commitment, the kind of pre-game stuff of War of Nerves just to see how it went. And then extended build-up and strategic surprise. Actually, all of them have a 1988 or a 1983 loadout. So your order of battle is going to be a little bit different in each of those. I primarily played with 1983 for whatever reason. Yeah, so a good mix of scenarios, not like endless amounts, but it's such a big game that you're going to have lots to explore with both of those.
Yeah. And it's I mean it's certainly not a light game, but it's not super heavy either. It's certainly nothing like World in Flames or the Third World War or anything like that.
No, which actually funny you mentioned the Third World or not the Third World War. You mentioned Third World War, but that reminded me of the Second World War, which is of course the game I had such a adverse reaction to. Because I saw like multiplication and division of strength points, which is such a big component of the Second World War, and that's also here too. But it's not near as bad as I thought it might be. So one thing I want to talk about, you want to talk about how the game is not overly complex. I agree. I think all of the core concepts of this game are straightforward. There is a little bit of nuance to the air control. Air control is basically counted 5 hexes away from a city you control that's in supply or from a unit that's in supply, and then it can bump into your opponent's air control where it becomes contested. Yeah. And that will impact different things, air landings, where you can do strikes, all that stuff. I really like that. It's not a hard concept at all, and supply is a little nuanced here as well. Again, all of this is straightforward, but what I want to say is this is and I will 87-page rulebook. And when we showed up at VikingCon back in February, when I first started messing around with this game, I saw 87 pages and I thought, Nate, you're fucking high. That's ridiculous. This is the best 87-page rulebook I've ever read.
Really? Nice.
I think if you spend a lot of time with this rulebook, it's surprising at how approachable it is, and it is brilliant. It gives a intro paragraph. Let's say you're going to lead the supply rules. It gives you a oh, are you a seasoned wargamer? Have you played lots of Hex Encounter wargames? Skip this part. Here's what you need to know. Then come back and read the case rules. It is extremely well organized. Those little introductions before each major rule component were like enough to play the game if you knew what's going on. Now, like I said, when I got into like air control stuff, yeah, I wanted to dive in, but then when I read supply rules, got the nuance of like you'll be in combat supply until you go into combat, so you can actually be out of supply but still be fighting at full strength because you haven't spent all your ammo. That's one of the little nuances of this game I love. It's such a cool supply mechanic. Like, yeah, of course you're not going to run out of combat effectiveness until you spend that combat effectiveness. Really cool. But you get that brief introduction of what it looks like, and then you just use this very well organized rule book to come look up the detail when it matters. And I wish more games that are like of this girth did some kind of just introduction of like, okay, here's the big picture supply stuff. Do you need to read the details of each rule right now? Yes or no? And it'll tell you just like, oh, skip it. Come back to this later. It's brilliant. It's so damn good. It's a little wordy, and it is a little repetitive. But for 87 pages, I thought, oh, man, this is going to be a hot, stinking pile of doo-doo. And it was a great rule book.
Cool. What about the Chrome in the game?
Yeah, I think there's the great question. Chrome, I think the supply mechanic represents like modern supply. You're kind of throwing supply forward or daisy chaining back. I guess it's not really throwing forward like OCS or anything like that, but you're daisy chaining back. And then you also have this element of combat supply as well, which adds that. My understanding is supply was not present in the original game. I really like the mechanic added here. There's air power. There's nuclear strikes, there's chemical strikes, which I mess around with both of, which is awesome. Your hands are not tied completely from using those, which is nice. Helicopters are present. They have flight in and out. I thought the helicopter rules were a nice amount of Chrome without a ton of rules overhead. Same thing with air landings and naval landings. They're such a key component of the game, especially the ball tap.
Sure.
Funny.
Yeah.
And then one thing you alluded to is like the reaction. So how do you make like Warsaw Pact different than NATO? You want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Well, I just, like I said, I just played around with the ball tap scenario, but the NATO guys, well, a couple things that you've already talked about that I just want to sort of reinforce. You talked about air power or air control or however they do it, but you mentioned it was for airdrops and it's for naval landings as well. So it basically like you can sink their naval landing before they even get to shore, and then you don't have to worry about them if and your odds of doing that are better if you have air control there. But then also the NATO guys have the ability to react into spots. So, you know, if you're at the spot next to the naval landing and you say, this is where I'm landing, the NATO guys have the ability to move into that spot and defend it, which that was one of the things I remembered from that scenario.
Nice. A couple of things. I think what you mentioned another type of reaction. NATO had advanced capabilities, or that's at least Bruce Maxwell's proposal here. I don't know, but meaning they can do defensive strikes, and that's not an option of the Warsaw Pact. Also, NATO, when they're committing to combat, is way more loosey-goosey because they had a looser command structure. So before you do any air strikes or artillery strikes or nuclear strikes or chemical strikes, any of those with Warsaw Pact, you designate all of your battle markers on hexes that you might want to attack that turn. So you can't see how effective your chem strike or your artillery strike or your air strikes are going to be and then put a attack marker down. You have to put them down, and then you are going to go through and resolve those. So you got to do a little pre-planning as the Warsaw Pact, which is really cool. Combat, it's and just general turn structure of a NATO game is going to be pretty typical. Warsaw player is going to do a supply check. They're going to move. There's another cool thing with air control. If you're in an enemy if enemy has air power over your units and it's not contested, that limits the type of movement you're going to be. You're not going to be able to do the double move, basically. And so there's like extended consequences of having different air control over different, and all that's beautifully laid out in the rulebook. It's easy to find. You do your movement, you do your battle planning phase, you do your strikes, and then you do your combat. Combat resolution in games like this are so important to me. I think that's one reason why I love like Next War. I love going through that sequence of play, resolving all types of combat. Combat here is great. What's interesting is Nate pointed this out to me, there's no die roll modifier in combat. It's all column shift. So your die roll is going to be flat. Just on combat, on strikes it's a little different, but you're going to be modified based off type of unit. Are you a hard unit or not? What are you attacking into? What are you attacking over? All of that typical stuff you would expect to see from a true blue hex encounter war game. But this is just a really, really good one.
What did you not like about it?
Okay, so most of what I didn't like about it is it's I go, you go. But which in the ball tap scenario really isn't that bad. In the extended build up and the strategic surprise, there is a lot of counters on the map. But it's not death stacks. It's manageable. Anytime you just have I go, you go structure, you're going to do everything. But again, the NATO player is always on alert. And I guess even the non-moving player in some situations, even though Warsaw Pact's limited, they don't have the defensive strike. They do have reactions into hexes if they want to. I will also say, like, you have to conquer cities. You don't just stop. You don't just, like walk into Antwerp and take it, or walk into Amsterdam and take it.
Even if there's not a shit there, they're still defended.
Right. So then you gotta clear it out. And so like you can't do an airdrop on Copenhagen. You have to drop around Copenhagen and then take Copenhagen.
Yeah. Land next to it and then move in, all that stuff, yeah. Yeah. And you can land and attack it on the same turn, and it's all very clear about that. But my biggest complaints are the things that don't matter. And that's the physical components. And this is where I didn't see any, so
this is where compass themselves.
Yeah.
So the biggest kind of complaint and why I didn't buy the new version of Korea, which I would love to get, right? Like I have the older version, I've never played it. We should really play that game.
Is that the Belkowski one?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Is they blew it up and made it huge, right? And then they added all this stuff that probably didn't need to be in there. So if you take a look at the maps, it's not a paper map, it's not a mounted map, and it's like a really thick cardstock map that I feel like if you bend it in one spot wrong, you're never going to get that crease out. It's just like a weird... Like, I've seen beautiful maps from Compass. Like, the Battle Hymn maps are beautiful paper maps, regardless of the fact that it doesn't have a fucking compass on it. Hello. I'm actually looking at this map right now. I don't think it has a compass either. I mean, it's a little bit obvious, but other than the compass, I don't think this has a compass, which is fine. But it is such a weird material that it's a little bit unruly and hard to work with, and it bothered me.
That's weird.
The other thing...
I can't think of another game that's got like a cardstock map.
It's a cardstock map, but it's not the same cardstock as the cardstock for the handouts, which are like really foldable.
Yeah.
The sequence of play, Rich, which is also doubles as your terrain effects chart, is legal-sized paper. And there's two of them because the sequence of play is different for Warsaw and different for NATO because of like the battle planning phase, and it just lists out the nuances. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. Why do I want a legal-sized, which if you don't know what a legal-sized paper is, almost with this, take like an 8.5 and 11 and turn it hot dog style and then put another 8.5 and 11 by it. And so like you're dealing with like a folded out book for your sequence of play. Like, so why is this so long?
Fold it in half to put it in the box, or?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then you open it up. You open up the fold in half part to see all the terrain effects.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like, why? And the problem is why, and the reason that matters Like, oh, Matt, it's just a big piece of paper. Why are you upset about it? Because this is an extremely table and handout, what's the play raid heavy game.
Yeah.
Like, NATO has their own intercept rules. Warsaw Pact, or not rules, but modifiers in results table. And Warsaw Pact has their own table. Plus you have setup cards. And it's just like a lot of play raid cards. And then you have this sequence of play that's overly big. I don't get it. And again, that doesn't really matter. That shouldn't cloud your judgment on this game, because when it boils down to it, NATO, the Cold War Goes Hot, is freaking fantastic. I was so pleasantly surprised by this game in so many ways. One, reading the rulebook. Wow, was it good. Two, just getting down and playing it, both solo and oppose, was a very, very enjoyable experience. And like there's when you talk about like Chrome and stuff, when you're not doing the ball tap scenario, Warsaw Pact has this whole other like supply mechanic they have to worry about that's different. Then of course like you have like the Iron Curtain where you can cross in the build up. It's so good. So good. I really, really liked it.
Nice.
But you don't have to take my word for it if you don't want to take my word for it. And Rich, like you said, you only got to play around with it a little bit. Let's not listen. I have Nate's thoughts who picked this game. Here's what Nate said about NATO. I appreciate that a designer had the humiliate to reevaluate such a popular title for its time and incorporate scholarship and research that was not available at the time of the original design. The result is a game that tries, with the benefit of hindsight, to accurately represent how the opening of World War III might have gone and the unique challenges each side faced, without the oversimplified quality versus quantity model many World War III games have used. I like that. That was Matt. Now back to Nate. I also appreciated the copious designer notes, agreed, including the post-Soviet Union research information and the style of the rulebook. Again, agreed. Lastly, I think it's unusual to see a wargame design that makes a reasonable playtime one of its goals, but NATO does this, obviously at the cost of some complexity. However, I think that the right system and features were simplified so that the integrity of the game isn't compromised. Agree 100%. We actually talked about this. Like, let's compare this to Next War, right? You have this cool kind of air power that's just a little bit more involved than Next War's standard air rules. The benefit of that, and I love the advanced rules in Next War, is you can play this game, the full thing, in a day, right? Like an evening, a long evening, a long afternoon. Very, very playable. So, any other questions, Rich, or any concerns or anything like that?
No, I want to see where it falls on the list.
Okay, so folks, recommended reading, just like go read Tom Clancy or something, right?
Yeah.
Watch, even though it has nothing to do with it, just watch Red Dawn. Well, I was going to say Wolverines. That's not the name of the movie, but Wolverines. Go watch Red Dawn or some shit like that. Folks, we have a list of every war game ever made, ranked from best to worst. Right now, we're 78 games deep, with Republic of Rome sitting atop the throne. Here's how it works,
still
though.
Rich, to say that, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. Rich is going to pick out a little apron for me. I'll get Rich's apron. I don't know why you can't grab our own. We're going to tie each other, get our aprons on. We're going to spin up the wheel of mud and clay. And we shape this list because this list is completely objective. It is a truly objective, undeniable, infallible ranking of every war game ever made. So we've played some powerhouses this year to kick it off. Republic of Rome, Plantagenet, Downfall. Like, Rich, that's a killer. Yeah. What did we play last month?
Did we play?
That's terrible.
Can't expect.
Oh, Norman Conquest. Oh, yeah. We played Norman Conquest. Right. Norman Conquest, which is Men of Iron, which, although not a top 8 series, amazing series. Where does this fall? and like that scale, like if we're like thinking of things you've played recently that are fresh in your brain, I think it's a little below Downfall. Not quite as good as Plantagenet or Republic of Rome, but probably better, I think, than Norman Conquest. So where does that put it? It's like at 28, we have Blitzkrieg Legend. For my money, they're very different games, but like you're scratching a similar itch just in terms of scale, operational scale, supply concerns as OCS. So maybe you're talking...
Well, do you like this one better than Axis Empires?
That's kind of where I think it falls just a little bit short. I was actually looking at Sekigahara.
Yeah.
Last 100 Yards is down there as well. Ooh, maybe this splits Last 100 Yards in Front Towards Enemy. Liberty Roads is actually a really good comparison. I think that's where we should be looking. And I think I like this more.
You like this more than Men of Iron Tri-Pack?
Yeah, because I like it more than Normandy 44. So I'm not going to touch the question you proposed. And here's why maybe that's significant to the listeners at home. I don't like Cold War games. It really has to be something that I want to play in terms of just like, for me to pull this out, that's kind of it's not a big deal because it's just a board game, but so like that's not my go-to.
Cold War games, do you mean like the 1985 War in Europe games that there's a million of?
Yeah. Like the Cold War goes hot games are usually of the least interest to me, but I think the puzzles and the challenges and the victory conditions this game proposes throughout the different scenarios are very intriguing, and the gameplay itself is just fun. But man, Liberty Roads is good as well. Let me ask you this, because I think like I'm going to put it above Normandy 44, and then since you didn't get a chance to play this, if you didn't have a convention coming up next week and we were both off work, I was like, hey, let's get together and let's play Liberty Roads or let's play NATO. Which one would you lean towards?
Liberty Roads.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at actually too. I think it's a very like great, solid games, big picture, big map of Europe, but I think Liberty Roads, I really like Liberty Roads. I think that gets lost sometimes in all the other stuff we talk around there, but Liberty Roads is really, really solid.
It is, yeah.
Excuse me. But this is really solid too, so don't, anyone who's listening, one, this is a damn good game. I did talk to Mitch about this game, and I know he's a huge fan of the original, and he didn't remember exactly why, but he preferred the original more. There's nothing in this game that makes me want to go track down the original. Everything that's here, other than the weird card stock and oversized player aid cards and the ridiculous amount of player aid cards, makes for a fantastic game, operational scale with satisfying combat, and that's what I want. So I'm going to put it right below Liberty Roads if you're good with that.
I'm good with that.
Okay. So, we now have 79 games on this list. Rich, how many more do we have to go?
Well, we've got another one today, so we got at least one more.
All right, very good.
And then we'll evaluate from there.
Yeah, we're double dipping this month. Rich, tell us about it.
Okay, so the first game for this month was supposed to be till I threw an audible and we switched around there. The other game for this month is this is Don's pick, right?
This was the patron picks. Don play tested this game.
Okay, so Prelude to Revolution, Russia's descent into anarchy, 1905 to 1917. That's a long title. Game designed by Mike Wilner, art by Knut Grinitz. I'm sure I butchered that. And like I said, we're doing all Compass games this month. This one came out just last year, 2023.
Yeah, let's just get the this out of the way real quick. In terms of physical components, this is a great production by Compass.
Cool.
Good.
Yeah, this is another one. I played a little on Vassal. Haven't.
All around, I think it's solid. Great rule book. It's actually a very light game. I think it's got a 20-page rule book and then a map with all kinds of different points you can interact with. So it looks like there's a lot going on, and there is a lot going on, but it's relatively straightforward. And I actually really like, and we don't always talk about this, but just the artistic presentation of the map, the different districts, all the different tracks. I really am a big fan of that. So A+ to that. I think the card design is a little ho-hum. I would love to see like some period piece art that has to be in public domain by now.
Yeah, it's basically just the side, the blue or the red mark on there. It's got a couple numbers for, practical purposes. It does have a little description and then the text of what the card does. But yeah, there's no art or photos or anything on there.
Right. And that's a nitpicky thing. We don't really have to go into that. But I did just want to say, like, all in all, this is it is a great production from Compass. So yeah.
I think just in general, the board, I mean, if we're just talking about, I don't know physical components, but I know what it looks like from the Vassal module. It's got artwork of the city, but it's really just dominated by the tracks that you're using to track your influence over the different areas and everything. And it's fine. I'm not crazy about it. I don't think it's gorgeous or anything. It's functional. But like, if you look at it, kind of blur your eyes and look at it, it could be literally anything, because you're just tracking a bunch of tracks.
That's a really fair point. And we'll get into those tracks, but I think for whatever reason, when I first saw this game demoed at Compass Games Expo, I saw all those tracks and I was like, oh, what the hell is that? I want that. But you're right. I didn't think about it in that regards. If you do just, cross your eyes a little bit, or if you have bad eyesight or anything like that, like, it is kind of washed out by these bright blue and red tracks.
Yeah, because the art of the city is like black and white pen work, but it's very light, and you can't really see it unless you're looking for it.
Right. But it is there,
yeah.
And I think it looks nice, but I do think it's a valid point. So, about the game. You already indicated the years 1905 to 1917. This is the build-up to the Russian Civil War, primarily focusing on St. Petersburg. This is a card-driven game, so players are going to go back and forth playing cards. You're going to use those cards for action points, or you're going to use them for the event. Or if you play an opponent's card, which is this typical CDG stuff, you will trigger that event if it's their events. If that event cannot be triggered, this is a cool component I like of this game. It's going to go into an opportunity pool, and your opponent will actually get something called opportunity points. The opportunity pool is seeded at the beginning of each turn. It will be seeded by key events. Those key events will be things like Tsar granting the Constitution, Vladimir Lenin, Nicholas II, Rasputin, all those like people and events you might expect to see. And this opportunity pool gets seeded with those cards depending on the phase you're in, and you can buy those cards on your turn to activate their events, paying an amount of opportunity points equal to their action point cost. So
it's partially determined by the phase you're in. Is there 3 phases, I think? Maybe 4.
Yeah.
And partially determined by the phase you're in, and then also there are prerequisites to a lot of them as well. So, this card can't be played if this is not in effect, or if this score is higher than this number or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots of prerequisites, lots of things to consider, which I like. You're exactly right. You're going to play through 3 phases in this game: the Year of Turmoil, the Great War, and the Collapse. Those phases will, just for example, Year of Turmoil and Great War have 2 turn cycles, so 2 times of drawing up your hands, and the Collapse has 3. The game can end early if there is revolutionary unrest can trigger the scoring the game end, or if the Tsar's prestige gets too high, the autocracy will be reimposed. Otherwise, you play the game across 7 turns, each of those turns having different triggering events. There are 8 activations, but you'll do things like Duma, which is the kind of joke of a Congress set up by the Tsar begrudgingly, and you're going to essentially, what you are doing in this game is for the most part placing cubes in different districts, which may be physical places. I guess they're all physical places, but they may be worker influenced or military influenced or just general areas like Palace Square, Winter Palace, something like that, or it can be something like the Reserve Regiment barracks. And you'll place cubes either using action points, playing events that, of course, typical card-driven game stuff. It will tell you to do all kinds of different things. One thing I noticed right off the bat is there's not a lot of chance for removal just in terms of the cards. So this is not a war game, right? This is very much a political warfare game. You're building influence in different regions.
And each of the regions, depending on who you're playing, like the cubes will have different costs. So like there are certain areas that it's harder for the Reds to get into, or certain areas harder for the Blues to get into. And there's also a catch-up mechanic where if your opponent has more cubes than you do, then you get to not pay some of those extra costs until you catch up. So it's not just as straightforward as putting cubes, but and also the different locations can affect other locations as well. So there is an actual map on there. I mean, it's over the map of the city, but locations do affect other locations and such.
Yeah, Winter Palace will influence your ability to place cubes in the Reserve Regiment, for example, or Kronstadt Naval Base. And then events will just like you can just place 3 cubes wherever you want, or whatever the event happens to say. The cool kind of thing. So the card play itself, I actually thought was pretty straightforward. The thing that I thought was most interesting was the card you will play will then advance a different scoring track marker. So one, for example, is just who controls the most districts. One is who's the furthest on the World Affairs track, which I'll just say it now. I thought the World Affairs track was completely tacked on. It probably could have been dropped. I think the world, I understand why it's in there because you want to pick up the interaction of the rest of the world in Russia during this time period, but the World Affairs track, just not impressed by that. Organizations, you can organize your party in different districts, and sometimes you have to organize in the Duma to get your workers organized to then go organize in Nevsky shipyards or something like that, or you can just organize in Truda Palace. That helps different checks and all of your actions in those areas, and then it's its own thing as well. Who has the most organizations, who's organized in the most districts, and then finally who controls the Duma. And so when you play a card, it's going to tell you to roll a dice on that track. So if you play a districts card, you will roll the districts dice, which has a 50% chance to increase the district track, and then a 50% chance to hit the other tracks. Yeah. So you might think like
increase, you're talking about move it closer to scoring.
To triggering the scoring.
Yep.
And so you're kind of in the driver's seat, but this little bit of randomness of, all right, I am way ahead on districts. And so let me play this districts card in the hope that I'll score some district points, but then maybe you don't. Or districts may score before you actually get the chance. I kind of like that kind of surprise. It builds a little bit of tension in the game that overall I'll just say I wish this game had a little bit more tension for a game of this. Like, I'm thinking things like Red Flag Over Paris, things like that, which are very tense as you go back and forth trading cubes. This at time felt a little not tense, but this
and the game that I would most closely compare this to is Twilight Struggle.
Yeah, sure.
And in Twilight Struggle, if you're behind, you have to pay more to catch up, and that adds to tension because it's hard to having control is so important because it's hard to catch back up. In this game, it's the opposite. It's easier if you're behind. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that leads to what you just said and the lack of tension in the game.
I didn't think about that, but I think you're right, because the lack of tension for me came from you have all these districts, and then you have this world affairs track, and then you have revolutionary unrest and the Tsar's prestige, and then you have the Duma, and you're monitoring those cards over there. And I played this game opposed some with friend of the show, Kevin, First Contact Gamer. And when we were talking about it, he had the same point, was there's just so much. And I understand, well, every single one of these locations are on there because it matters for the history, which I think is a very interesting period in history that needs to be gamified more in like a more traditional war game. I think it'd be really interesting with all the different factions. Someone go design it. It's not going to be me. But it's just like, okay, I'm going to place some cubes over here and kind of catch up. And the score, like, I see where my opponent, or even playing this opposed, someone would snowball and start picking up lots and lots of victory points. And then if they ever get to 20, it's also game over.
Yeah. I mean, no,
but
the scores
it never
do
felt
reset when you score them, but the cubes don't reset. So, yeah.
Right, but like if you still control 6 more districts than the other guy, you're going to pick up 3 points.
Right.
And every time it keeps going. So like, yeah, you have to roll districts 4 more times to score districts again. But it's like, oh, I'm behind on a district, but I don't feel the imminent need to catch up on districts. The only imminent need I really felt was just kind of keeping my... So each side in the Duma, each player has like... They have their extremists and their moderates. So...
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just explain it real quick and then you make your point. Reds have socialists and radicals, and the loyalists have liberals and monarchists, which really simplifies the political structure and nature of Russia during this time period. But I understand why it's that way, and you just have to... You really want to leave those things in balance because they're kind of at odds with each other, and it can like snowball into adverse consequences, which we can talk about. But Rich, go ahead and make your point.
So, like you said, each player has 2 parties, and they're responsible for both of them. But the only place it really matters, I think, is in the Duma. And it can lead to you having more scoring in the Duma, like you can get dominance instead of influence, or what, I don't remember what it's called, but you get more points when the Duma scores. But there's also Duma phases where your own cubes will start to switch from your moderates to your extremists. And it's based on a die roll, it's based on the number of cubes, but the game mechanics are set up so that it's always going to flow that direction. To the point where after a few Duma phases, you're not really going to have moderates anymore. Everybody's going to be extremists. And I'm not sure what I think about that as a game. I haven't decided yet. It feels a little railroady. I think he's trying to express what happened historically, but as a game mechanic, I'm not sure I like it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think it also kind of just depends on how your die roll goes, right? Like,
yeah,
because there were some
based
games
on a die roll, but the more you get into the extremist party, the more the die roll modifiers are going to make it so that you cannot not get more into the extremist party.
You're exactly right. You're either going to be losing your moderates, or you're going to be losing your moderates and gaining extremists. Yeah, I think that's fair. And so, like Rich said, I don't know how I felt about that either. I just like tried to avoid it every time when I best I could, just to avoid things like revolutionary unrest. Although, as the Reds, you might want that. Although that kind of depends on if you have revolutionary unrest. It doesn't necessarily favor the Reds. It more depends on loyal troops and things like that at the end of the game. But yeah, the Duma vote will happen. Not only will the Duma track score, that's one of the scoring dice will come up, but also each turn until the collapse, you have this phase where the Duma will vote, and then each party will do a check to see if they mobilize, and then you will do this kind of growing extremism where Rich just said each side will lose moderates and things get more and more extreme. I get what you're saying. I don't know how you fix that. Because I like that he's trying to model it, but maybe the model, I didn't have a problem with it. I just didn't find it overly interesting, that particular component of the game. But I do like what he's trying to model. And so you keep doing that, and you keep adding cubes, and that's where I don't want to say I started having problems with it. But what I kind of wanted to happen is the game take more defined narratives between the phases. I don't know if you got far enough into the other cards, but I'm like, okay, here's a turmoil. You're playing this card, you're playing that card, and it does it some. But I was hoping for a little bit more dramatic shift in like card tone and abilities in the later phases.
Kind of like in Paths of Glory. You have a real incentive to get later into the war because your cards are going to be way better.
Yeah, and it's not so much that they're bad. It's just like there's only so many cards that remove cubes, and it's like you're in the collapse phase and you get a card and it's a new card, and it may be a card that has some historical flavor, and all it does is it just gives you a modifier on the world affairs chart. Like, we're in the end game, and I'm just adding one on the world affairs track, which, again, it can snowball. It can get you some points. I get it. But I don't know. The narrative I wanted it to take in late game didn't develop like I hoped it would, and I thought that the cards would drive it. But there wasn't that, other than the game filled up and did get a little bit more intense because like things are full or nearing full, and you're starting to do a little bit back and forth, and maybe you're losing cubes here or there. It just didn't take that path. So I do like the opportunity pool. I do like that when you play an opponent's card, it doesn't just keep getting recycled back in. They then, if the event didn't trigger, they have to take some actions to get that card played. And same thing with neutrals. If you play neutrals for action points can be used to buy cubes, like Rich said. They can be used to set up organizations. And then the opportunity points, you buy the cards, and you can use them as a die roll modifier when you do mobilization checks, which are like setting up districts and or setting up organizations.
Yeah, I agree. The opportunity pool, and I guess it's considered part of the opportunity pool, but the cards that are just, they don't get shuffled in. They're just always available for you to buy for your side. I thought those were... Oh, and what was the other thing? The one-time actions that you can use once over the course of the game. Those were cool, too. All of those things I just thought were interesting because, they give you some fail-safe options if you get a bunch of crappy cards, which I liked.
Yes, agreed. And there's once per turn actions, and you have 6 of them, so you can only take one turn off, or you'll lose them because you can only use one a turn, and there's 7 turns. Are great, and they can let you do really cool things like use a 6 action point card without putting your opponent's 6 action point card back in the opportunity pool. They can do things like deny that and stuff. So there are some really cool things, and I do think it's a very interesting period of history, but also just a lot of... This was a complaint of Brotherhood and Unity, right? A lot of the cards just felt samey, and that was the case here, especially like the same like generic cards, like the cards that were Linen and I wish I remembered more, but like demonstration cards. Like they would do something cool, and you'd pick up some points, and they would impact the game in this meaningful way. But then you also just had a lot of like generic cards, and those kind of just like kept popping up, and they seem to pool in the opportunity pool without. And maybe this just comes from more experienced play with more competent players. That just seemed to pool there that didn't gather a lot of attention all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But I had fun with it. And I think biggest complaint-wise would just be it didn't have the tension that I wanted. Yeah. A game like this needs to be tense. It needs to be Twilight Struggle. You nailed it, right? Like you're back and forth, you're trading blows. This just didn't have it.
It played just fine solitaire too.
Yeah, I mean, but then again, that gets rid of some of the tension too. So I played this a little bit opposed, and I played it solitaire as well. I actually taught this to my wife. She does not play a lot of historical games with me, but again, I was like, actually, it's just like like I sold it as like a more the political game, which it is, than being any kind of war game. And I was like, you don't really need to know the history. We're just going to be placing cubes and vying for control. I think she thought it was fine, but again, it just wasn't exciting. There was no like stand-up sweaty gamer moment, right? So, what about you? Any other closing thoughts or anything?
No, that's it. I mean, if you like CDGs, if you like Twilight Struggle, if you like coin games, you're going to like this one. I mean, it's got the same energy as those, I think.
Yeah. It does. It's those light, right? Like it's, you know what it is, Rich? It's the step between the Lunchtime series, Fort Sumter, Red Flag Over Paris, and Twilight Struggle, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah, I would agree.
It's that in between.
Yeah. This one does feel a lot like Red Flag Over Paris as well. It's got a lot of that energy as well.
Yeah, but again, not as, because one, you're so spread out and there's so little, I don't want to say there's not interaction, and there's interesting things to gauge. I don't want to say it's not interesting. It's just like thrilling. You're constantly keeping the Tsar's prestige is going to be moving like crazy. Revolutionary unrest moves a decent amount. All those things you have to gauge and be mindful of. And I think that's more the takeaway, is that this game is a slow building snowball instead of something that snowballs out of control very, very quickly, like Twilight Struggle, Red Sea, right? Like, you can lose that game so fast by just letting 2 or 3 spots snowball out of your control, and then boom, score, game over, you can lose. This is like a very slow build up. And if you let those things run away from you, then you're going to be in trouble. But the problem is when it's a slow build up like that, it's still a good design. It's just that excitement kind of goes out the window because you're waiting for things to build up.
Yeah. I mean, going back to my Twilight Struggle comparison, part of the, actually it's probably part of the good thing and the bad thing about Twilight Struggle, there are certain cards that have game-changing effects. So you need to be able to be ready for them no matter which side you're playing. But there are cards, that can remove all your opponent's cubes from an area and allow you to stack them up even though he had a big advantage. To your point, there's nothing that really lets you do that in this game.
Yeah. I do want to say, I want to go back to, just because I don't want to be too hard on this, when I talk about like the narrative of the cards, the later cards were, as a whole, they did drive the game forward. It's just not quite at the pace or impact I wanted. Again, seeing a card that just adds 1 to the World Affairs track when you're late in the game and you want to make moves and you want to wrap things up, it's like, oh, okay. Like, that's not a game-swinging card, and it's buried in the late game because, and maybe that's just the model of the World Affairs track, because it's tied to a card that does with something outside of Russia. But anyways, that's just my point, is it does drive the game forward. It's just not like the level I wanted and was like building towards, like, okay, we're building a little bit. Oh yeah, things are really going to pick up, and I see the cards. It's like, okay. So, I do want to share Don's thoughts, because Don was the lead playtester on this game, or I don't know if he was the lead playtester, but he did a ton of playtesting on this game, and he also developed the player strategy guide, and so he really liked it. And so, just because I'm not gushing over this one. I think it's a very fine game. Here's Don's thoughts because he really liked it. I think the game is a unique take on a CDG, using actions and ops point to populate and control districts on the map. The 4 scoring tracks are also unique and together create tough choices for how and where players should put their energies. You can't let your opponent get too far ahead or they will score VPs at every scoring round. Yes, agreed. But like most CDGs, you never have enough action, op points to everything you want. I felt pretty flush on a lot of that stuff. Don says he play tested this with the designer. We probably played close to 20 games together, put a lot of research into the game, and the history really comes through. I do agree with that. Given the history, I think this is a very thematic game that reflects the struggles that both sides had to deal with in order to further their cause. I love the tactile nature of the cubes and the visual representation of the districts in the Duma. I agree there. You maybe not so much, although I know the system, Prelude to Rebellion in this game, receives some criticism for looking like a spreadsheet. Like many CDGs, the more you play, the more you learn the cards, the better you are at this game. Although it is also fun for those only want to play it once or twice. Again, it's also a very playable game, which is a valid point. Like, light rulebook, really easy to get tabled, easy to play solo, easy to play the Vassal Module solo, all of those things. Okay. Anything else, Rich?
No, I think that's it.
Recommended reading.
I don't have any recommended reading for this. I'm sure there's good books out there, but I haven't read them, so.
I bet you have recommended listening. Huh? Well,
you talking about that Dan Carlin podcast?
Yeah. Or no, Mike Duncan.
Oh, Revolutions?
Yeah. His last thing was the whole Russian Revolution,
okay.
And it was so good. I don't know, maybe it was
I haven't
so
heard
long.
That one, but sure.
Oh, man, it's a marathon. I loved it. It was so engrossing. And it does a better job than Beaver's Russian Civil War, because Beaver's detail on the events leading up to the Civil War is so much shorter. The juice of Beaver's book is the Civil War, which is so fascinating to me, and all the different factions. But if you read the very first part of Russian Civil War by Beaver, if you're going to go down that path, then that would be fine. But yeah, the Revolutions podcast nails it. It's perfect reading because this is really about the build up. This is not about the Russian Civil War. It's all leading up to that and the ongoings in St. Petersburg. Okay. There you go. Shall we rank it?
All right. We have 79 on our list now.
Yeah, sure do. Okay, I'm going to let you drive this one a little bit.
Right.
I'm going to point out we have Twilight Struggle on the list.
I know, and I was just looking for it, trying to remember where it is.
64.
64. For the game, some people say it's the greatest war game of all time.
That's right.
Huh. See, I like this one better than Königsberg 45.
Do we have Königsberg above Twilight Struggle?
Yeah, we do. That's 59.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Flashpoint's...
Flashpoint Shot Sign of Sea, which has similarities to it. I think this is like the area we're looking at, though. I'd put Captain C above this one, so I think I'd probably go between Captain C and Königsberg 45.
Boom. I'm fine with that because my ceiling was NATO Air Commander.
Yeah. And
my floor was... It's funny that this is going above Twilight Struggle. I mean, personally, yeah, I like this more than Twilight Struggle. I mean, again, I think I always worry about this. Whatever. It's our opinions. It is very much two dudes talking about games we enjoy. It's just like, I feel like we're hard on it, but I do want to say, like, I had fun with this game, and it was cool to play through it and like vie for control. You liked Königsberg less, huh?
I did, yeah. I think, like I've said it before, but if Königsberg was purely a solitaire game, it would be a better game. But
right, that was the one where the Russian player had like nothing to do.
The German player, Russian player was attacking, but yeah, it's late war. The Germans had nothing; they were just collapsing your defenses and hoping to, and that's just not fun. I mean, when every turn all you're doing is sitting there and trying to be in a position where it's hard to get attacked, it's not really fun.
But you liked Koenigsberg more than like Brave Little Belgium? You think, or at least think it's a better game?
I think it's a better game. Brave Little Belgium is, it's fun for
what
it
is,
is, but
yeah, this is better than that. You're right. The one hang up I have, if you'd humor me for a second, if someone said, "Would you buy this or Flashpoint South China Sea?" I would go with South China Sea.
Would you? I mean,
tension matters in these games, and I know I've said that word a million times.
Yeah.
But because you're trading blows constantly in Flashpoint, it drives it, and it plays so much faster. I mean, this is kind of, for what it is, it's kind of long. It's an easy game to table. It's playable.
Yeah, it's got a lot of turns in there. Like, if you play through all 3 eras, it's...
Yeah. Now, you can do some things as the player to like, oh, I'm if we go into Red October phase, like I have all the loyal troops and I'm going to score this, and this, like I will win if we go into Red October.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can do things to end the game early.
Yeah.
And if it snowballs again, it will end. So you're not necessarily playing all 56 card plays. It's...
Yeah, I'm not going to argue if you want to move it down to 62. Like I said, Koenigsberg, if it was meant to be a solitaire game, it would be a better game.
I'll leave it here.
All right.
I think it's a better overall just design approach. I like all the tracks. I like the research into it as well. I think there's just more nuance here and more legs to stand on than Flashpoint. Yeah, I like it here. Above is good. Okay, sorry for the detour.
No worries.
You already had it in the right spot. But.
Very
good. Rich, we have 80 games on our list. How many more to go now?
Well, there's no more to talk about today, so I guess we could stop if we do 80 more, or if we both play every game that either of us owns.
I just cleared it off my shelves. So
I got a big stack here. There's a at the local gaming store here, there's a garage sale coming up next month, but they were sold out of tables before I got there, so these will have to sit there till their next one.
Oh, interesting. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, we'll add at least one more next month. Rich, do you want to announce next month's game?
I think I know what it is. Is it the one I talked about earlier? Is it the
Sure is.
What's it called? It's not called Rebel Yell. It's called
Rebel Fury.
Rebel Fury. That's it.
Yeah, by Mark Herman. We're gonna play
Civil
it.
War Gaming.
Rolls on and on. Rebel Fury for May, followed up by BCS Month in June. It's gonna be a great time. There's a lot of action in that little Rebel Fury box.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's pretty cool.
I'll be picking it up.
Yeah, if you want to vote and help us decide which games to play, you go to patreon.com/historytable. You can vote our monthly poll. Again, I've already spoiled what June's will look like, but we'll have plenty of polls for.
So for June, you're just going to put all the BCS games on there and let them pick?
Yeah, unless you say there's like one explicitly you don't want to play.
Nope. No,
cool.
Nope. I'd be happy with any of them. I've played all of them at least a little bit.
Very good. Then all of them shall go up. Okay. I kind of hijacked this topic from the Discord because I thought it was really interesting. So Kevin, First Contact Gamer, I guess on the Next War Discord, came up with this, what I think Mitch has termed as the Gamer's Matrix of Wargaming. And he said over there, for me, complexity, usually light, medium, or heavy, is mostly relating to rules and other practical things such as time commitment. Whereas I would put things related to knowledge in the beginner, intermediate, advanced scale. Thus, if a game lets you draw in-depth conclusions, challenging decision you're making very well, or demand prerequisite knowledge of complex tactics, it would be advanced. So Mitch has then come up with this matrix where you have light, advanced, light, beginner, heavy advanced, heavy beginner.
So I like the comments on two of them, because light advanced,
right,
that's the unicorn. Everybody wants that game. I mean, and when I look for light advanced, typically what I'm looking for is like a really heavy game with a one map scenario. That's the closest I could think of for light advanced. Heavy beginner, yeah, no one, I don't know who would want to play that. Heavy
beginner. So that'd be like a heavy rules load that didn't involve like a level of understanding of tactics, and maybe like is more based on random skill more than anything else, or random luck than skill or anything else. So light advanced, do you think, not a game as a whole, but do you think certain Men of Iron scenarios would maybe rise to that level, where it's one of the scenarios where both forces are deploying at the same time and are able to implement different strategies? Or maybe that's just intermediate, because Men of Iron maybe doesn't necessarily come down to, I'll go to my favorite example, Antioch, Jason performing the hinge and swinging out of the fortress. Like, maybe that scenario doesn't come down to that actual tactic, so maybe it only rises to intermediate, where you can win at Men of Iron regardless of your understanding of medieval tactics.
The problem with Men of Iron, and I don't mean this as a negative way to the game, but I would mean it as far as calling it an advanced game, is that you're so dependent on those activation rolls that it's hard to really have a coherent strategy, because you have no idea who's activating next.
Yeah, that's probably fair. What would be something heavy advanced for you?
Heavy advanced, so like the biggest ones.
Yeah. Big rules overhead.
I guess it would be like a full campaign of OCS or GCACW.
I don't know about GCACW. I don't know if it rises there even in the full campaign.
Well,
I don't. Maybe medium advanced. The rules of adding in a campaign of GCCW aren't any heavier, I think, than like it's lighter than Pacific War, right? Like the full shebang of Pacific War.
That's true. Yeah, so Pacific War would be a good example too. I mean, I haven't played it, but the Second World War, World in Flames, one of those, I'm assuming. I know Mike's playing World in Flames right now and loving it.
Yeah. Like BCS, OCS, those probably rise up there. Goss,
advanced.
Yeah.
Campaign for North Africa.
What about Abundant Choice had this comment. I just thought this was interesting. There's no like right or wrong answer here, right? Like everyone's scale is going to be different. Do you think some of the ASL lights become light advanced?
When you say light, ASL light, do you mean other
like Band
tactical?
of Brothers?
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. I've really, of the ASL lights, I've only played one of them. I can't remember which one it was, but it was one of those things where the person I was playing with knew how to play it, so I never even looked at a rule book or anything. I told him, I'm like, I want this guy to go here, and he'd move a guy and he'd say, do you want him to shoot? No, yeah, I want him to shoot, that kind of thing. So I was making, I had zero knowledge of the rules at all. All I was doing is it was almost like he was the dungeon master and I was a player. So in that small experience, I would say, yeah, that could even be maybe up to light intermediate, because you're making tactical decisions on the spot, and the rules overhead, at least from my perspective, was nothing.
Well,
maybe.
What do you think about I guess you haven't played the series yet, and we can talk about this next month, but like Mark Herman's Waterloo or Rebel Fury. Light rules, but for me, I think it rises beyond beginner, because of like... Go ahead.
I haven't played those, but one we have both played is Battles of the American Revolution. Those are pretty light.
There you go. That's light intermediate for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, very good. I thought it was a really interesting topic that came up on the Discord. Everyone had different takes. I kind of picked and pulled from different people what they suggested. And everyone's scale is going to be different. Some people will be like, what the hell are you talking about? That GCACW rulebook, that's heavy stuff. Yeah, maybe it is for you. Everyone's just going to have a different stab at it. And some people will be like, oh, the advanced rules of Next War, that's advanced heavy through and through.
I mean, that's always going to be,
Right.
I mean, I told people I work with, I'm like, oh, I'm going away to play like big heavy games this weekend. And they're like, oh, like Catan?
Right.
Yeah, kind of like that. So whatever, sure.
Right. And then also, like, even when you're talking about the light, medium, heavy, like, we're thinking in terms of rules, but what about, like, time commitment? Because Kevin brought up a good point. Like, what about Day of Days, which rules light is SCS, but then, like, counter and play time is just, like, so dense that does that bump it up to something more beyond light? Because a lot of SCS games would be like, I don't know, just an interesting little thought exercise of how we, we're war gamers, and we can never, this is just another thing we wouldn't be able to agree upon. So if you're tired of debating what a war game is, you can adopt Kevin's Gamer's Matrix of wargaming.
Then you can go online and take like a personality test and figure out what quadrant you want to be in.
Just don't want to be heavy beginner, I guess. Mitch says no one would want to play with you. All right, very good. Well, Rich may not have played that much, but I feel like it was a productive month, and we have amazing games on the horizon, so that's exciting. And we have Historic Fest on the horizon. What else have you been up to? Anything else you want to talk about?
No, I've been singing a lot. I've been going out to town singing, so that's what I've been doing. And
singing in the rain.
No more singing trips until July, so we're good for a while.
Okay. Very good, buddy. Well, hey, as always, wonderful getting together. I hope next month is abundantly full for you. I've got Silver Bayonet, Last 100 Yards. I got to pick out the featured game for Kansas City Historical Gaming Group. Maybe it'll be Rebel Fury. I'll cheat a little bit. We got a good month ahead.
I saw a news article about Miniature Market, and apparently they got sold because, Asmodee bought them a couple years ago, and recently Asmodee sold them to a couple Asmodee employees. So it's still basically foreign owned, I guess, or whatever. They said their next big plan for Miniature Market is the opening of a new store location sometime later this year. So I have no idea when that's going to happen, but until it happens, we don't have a good place to play with the St. Louis group. So we're talking about options. We might go somewhere else, but there is another smaller gaming store. I went in and asked them about it, and I don't know. It's just, I think we could probably find a little space there, but it doesn't sound like they're willing to like reserve space and commit to us because they play a lot of Magic and Warhammer and stuff like that. So
sure. Well, if you're in the St. Louis area, continue to be on the lookout. All right. Well, if you got nothing else, I don't think I have anything else. All right. That's going to do it for us, folks. You can find us over on our Discord. There's a link down in the show notes, all of that stuff. Don't forget, go sign up for Historic Fest this year. I almost forgot the dates for a second. August 15th through the 18th, 2024. A new venue. Lots of events going on. Tons and tons of door prizes. You don't want to miss it. Go sign up. And yeah, pop on the Discord. Come say hey. That's going to do it for us.
Vote for BCS game.
That's right. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.